cases, a refugee may use the refugee travel document for travel in place of a passport. And for information on how to apply for a refugee travel document, go to our form I-131 application for travel document page. So someone must file the form I-131 for a refugee travel document before that person leaves the United States. And we recommend, if that's you, that you file the form no less than 60 days before you depart the United States to allow time for processing. The refugee travel document is valid for up to 1 year. If a refugee leaves the United States without getting a refugee travel document and they have been outside the United States for less than a year, they may seek permission from USCIS to file the form I-131 for a refugee travel document from outside the United States. And there is information about that on the website. And also note that if you have been admitted as a refugee, your status may be terminated if the U.S. government determines that you are not, in fact, a refugee at the time you're admitted to the United States. So if your travel pattern indicates that you did not experience past persecution or you don't have a well-founded fear of persecution, then on account of a protected ground, then you may need to explain your travel to that country to avoid losing your refugee status. So just wanted a heads up on that.
Great, thank you, Joanna. That was really helpful. Let me take this next question here. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit of a delay on my screen. Okay, the question is there an effort to prioritize refugee follow to join cases in U.S. RAP processing?
So I can answer that again. I might just be sure I heard the question correctly. Is there an effort to prioritize following to join family members in processing? So I will speak to the I-730s that USCIS handles without the support of resettlement support centers, which do support mostly in West Africa, provide some support for following to join family members. And in other locations, USCIS international offices where we're present will process the travel document eligibility piece of the I-1730, or if USCIS doesn't have a presence, then it would be consular offices that would process those. So I can say that from the USCIS perspective that we do find these to be, very important cases, and we want to reduce the time that it's taking now for I-730 processing. And so we've been working really hard to work through the backlog and to reduce the processing time for I-730s. We are completing an internal review of resources allocated to Form I-730 processing and considering proposals to increase resources dedicated to this workload. And this review will inform recommendations and decisions on resource allocation for the Form I-730 program within USCIS. We do deploy targeted refugee processing circuit ride teams to complete Form I-730 following to join refugee beneficiary interviews that assist with post-interview processing. So for example, we recently sent a circuit ride team to Uganda where they interviewed approximately 150 following to join refugee beneficiaries, significantly reducing the number pending interview. Also, just because I know there are a lot of questions about I-730, so I'm piggybacking on this one a little bit to give you a little bit more information. And to provide greater transparency into Form I-730 processing, we recently published an updated Form I-730 webpage. So hopefully you can look at that at uscis.gov/I-730. And the page has the most current information available for petitioners and beneficiaries. It provides detailed instructions on how to file the Form I-730 and addresses some of the most common questions. We're also working to develop an I-730 section in our policy manual that will be public-facing and contain detailed information on case processing and policies. Although we are actively developing this section, I'm afraid I don't have a current timeline for when we will publish it, but it is a priority. And we will continue to improve the I-730 program and share updates with you as we make more progress on this important workload.
Great, thank you, Joanna. All right, we have a question in here, and I believe this might be for Kelly. What committee in Congress handles the consultation of fiscal year 2023? Yes, and can there be special provisions for Cameroon as there are for Afghans? Kelly, can you take this question? Oh, you're on mute, Kelly.
Sorry, sure, thank you. Our consultative committees in Congress are the House Committee on the Judiciary and the Senate Committee on the Judiciary. And so in all, we have 8 consultative members. And so it's the chair and ranking member of the full committee in each the House and the Senate, and also the chair and ranking member of the Senate Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and Border Safety, and the chair and ranking member of the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and Citizenship. But in general, it's the House and Senate Judiciary. And the second part of that question was about Cameroon, and I believe whether we could establish programs for Cameroonians similar to Afghans. I will say it is fairly rare that we develop programs like we have for Iraqis and Afghans, where we have the Iraqi program was a self-application P2. The Afghan program is a government referral, government, NGO, and media direct referral to the State Department. And we tend to develop special programs like that, or in recent years we have for populations that we have had long contact with because of our long periods of work in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. We do also have a different style of P2. So those are more kind of direct application P2s or direct referrals. We also have P2s with UNHCR, where the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, where they work with us to basically draw a line around a certain population in a certain place to kind of pre-qualify them for referral to the United States. So recent examples include things like certain Congolese in Tanzania, certain Burmese in Thailand, accepted referral, and letting them know that when they leave Afghanistan and are in another country, to write back to us and let us know, and then we can add them to the processing queue. We currently have confirmed and accepted Afghans with P1 and P2 referrals in 50 countries around the world. So in addition to the processing we're doing at CAS and in other locations where we're doing kind of larger scale processing, we do have small to medium caseloads throughout Central Asia, Europe. We've even had people in Latin America and Africa. So we're obviously going to get to the cases sooner where we have more of a critical mass of them, but it is a high priority for the State Department to get to these cases, to pre-screen them and put them in line for USCIS interview.
Great, thank you, Kelly. And we have made some references to some links. I did publish some links in the Q&A box. I don't know if you all see it. The text looks a little jumbled, so we'll be sure to share those links with you after the engagement. All right. Okay, so the next question is, and Joanna, I think this one is for you. How does a refugee know where to go to apply for resettlement? Do embassies and organizations approach them? To clarify, did you say we are aiming to reduce the time to 6 months from referral to admission? Joanna?
Thank you. I'm going to start with the second question. It was a clarifying question, then go to the first question. So for the second question, when we're looking to reduce the overall time for refugee processing, consistent with the executive order, that was from referral to admission for those 6 months for most. Now, that's very ambitious. It's something we're really committed to strive to get to. And it may not be every refugee because it depends sort of where they are and when we can get to them. But to have the vast majority, ideal would be everybody, but the vast majority within 6 months. That is our goal, and that's what we're working to do for that or faster. In terms of the question was, I think, how can somebody apply for refugee status? So an individual cannot apply for refugee status with some limited exceptions. I was talking before about direct access, which is being able to submit an application. So unlike asylum, if a refugee is in the United States and they want to stay, they can submit an asylum application. Anybody can do that. That's not the way it works for refugee status. It's through or consideration. It's through a referral process. And so, with the exception of individuals who fall into some of those P2 categories, like the Iraqi P2 category I mentioned, or some Lautenberg religious minorities from certain parts of the world, there has to be a referral. And so that would be either UN High Commissioner for Refugees. So a refugee applicant in a third country can go to UNHCR. They can ask to be registered as a refugee. UNHCR would consider whether or not to refer them to the United States or to another country. And only a small percentage of refugees worldwide are referred for resettlement. If you look at the millions and millions of refugees that are there, generally UNHCR is trying to provide protection within the host country first, but some of those that are the most vulnerable will be referred to a third country. Kelly also mentioned, or it could sometimes be from an NGO. And Kelly also mentioned the work that the State Department is doing on working on a program for private sponsorship. So more to come on that, but there still has to be a referral process. And Kelly, I'm swimming in your lane here really for access. So please jump in and correct me or augment what I've said.
Thank you, Joanna. No need to correct anything you said. I might just add, though, that it is currently true that the majority of our referrals come from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. But in addition to developing a private sponsorship program, we are also developing a new NGO referral program. About 15 years ago, the State Department embarked on an effort to train NGOs, I think in 5 locations around the world, Nairobi, Accra, Bangkok, Moscow, and Cairo, to submit referrals to us. It didn't really take off. We didn't get a lot of NGO referrals. We have consistently gotten referrals from a couple of organizations that are headquartered in Nairobi, but the administration really wanted to expand this effort and to fund NGOs to help refer refugees to us. So we have just recently completed a process whereby we advertised on grants.gov for organizations to seek funding to submit referrals. We've just made a decision on funding that we haven't yet fully announced yet, so I can't say what the organizations are, but it's a consortium of organizations that we are going to be working with to basically help augment the referrals that we get from UNHCR and maybe reach some people that don't traditionally get reached by UNHCR or who don't feel comfortable approaching UNHCR because of their particular profile or nationality. So we're really excited about moving forward on that. We'll never get a large number of referrals from NGOs, we don't think, but it'll hopefully be a way to augment and kind of diversify the pool of refugees that we're receiving for referral.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Kelly and Joanna. All right, so the next question is related to security vetting. What is the status of the National Vetting Center and USRAP vetting? Has USRAP vetting begun at the NVC, the National Vetting Center? If so, has this affected the speed of vetting? What oversight measures are in place to ensure the National Vetting Center adds value and is not a source of delays for refugee processing?
Thank you. I'm going to take that, Noreen. This is Joanna again. And before I jump in, I just want to add one more thing to what I was saying before about access to the refugee admissions program, because there is one program that's a really important program, and I want to be sure that those on the call are aware of it, which is, they're all important programs, but the Central American Minor Refugee Parole Program, because that is a program where certain individuals who are, parents or legal guardians of children in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, depending on their status, the parent's status in the United States, they can affirmatively go to a resettlement agency in the United States and seek access for their child and certain other family members to the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. I'm not going to go in detail here. We've actually had stakeholder engagements on this as well, as I mentioned, but that is a program where there isn't a referral. The individual who just qualifies can go to the resettlement agency and seek access that way. So I encourage anybody who might be in that situation to get information from our website on that. Now I'm going to answer the question that you just asked about the National Vetting Center. So the National Vetting Center, which we're super excited about, began vetting refugee cases in March 2022. And it really fills a critical need by improving the manner by which federal officials identify individuals who may present a threat to national security. And over time, the US government has developed multiple unconnected processes to bring together threat information already lawfully held by the government about individuals seeking to enter the United States or obtain benefits under the immigration laws. And the NVC is centralizing and improving these processes to more efficiently and effectively inform department and agency vetting. So relevant, appropriate information is accessible in a consolidated and timely manner to the departments and agencies leveraging the National Vetting Center's process and technology. And USCIS is able to closely track the refugee vetting results within the NVC process and identify in near real time when issues or outages affect vetting and address them quickly. So it's a much more efficient and effective process. And again, we're very excited that it came online just in March, so it's still relatively new, but it's an improvement.
Thank you, Joanna. That was really helpful. All right, the next question is, how is USCIS managing onboarding and training as it increases fiscal year 2023 circuit rides? Will USCIS ensure staff are paired with experienced refugee officers when traveling overseas?
I think you got me again, Noreen. Let's try it again. So thank you very much for this question. It's really important for us as we think about onboarding so many new staff and making sure that they have the training and the support that they need to do their job very well. All new refugee officers must undergo an extensive 22-day training on refugee processing, in addition to a 30-day foundational course on asylum and refugee law, interviewing skills, and adjudication processes. We've scheduled 5 refugee officer training courses for calendar year 2022, and just over 100 new staff completed the 2020, just over 100 new staff, it's a lot of numbers, completed the 22-day refugee processing training between February and July of this year. All adjudicators of refugee applications, additionally, must complete field interviewing training, we call it FIT training, and experienced refugee officers train the new refugee officers on their first trip overseas, so the new officer's first trip overseas. And during FIT, the overseas trainers observe the new refugee officers' interviews and they provide detailed feedback on their adjudications. And this year, another exciting event for us, for the first time, we created permanent senior refugee officer positions so they can mentor, train, and support new officers and assist with complex cases. And these senior officers also support supervisory refugee officers in completing the required review of all refugee officer decisions.
Nani yavuniyemo urufunguzo wabibonye. 5 to 6 minutes left to this engagement. I will try to get through as many questions as I can. However, as I mentioned earlier on, after this engagement, we will determine how best to provide our answers to you for the remaining questions that we can get to. So this next question is, and we have received a lot of questions about video teleconference, also known as VTEL, for refugee interviews. So the question that I have right now is, can you detail your efforts to improve or expand VTEL capabilities and technology? How many refugee interviews did USCIS conduct by VTEL this fiscal year? And how have you addressed inefficiencies in VTEL?
I think I can take this one. Drew.
Thank you, Drew.
So as of August 4th this year, USCIS has conducted in-person or VTEL initial interviews and re-interviews for just over 31,000 refugee applicants in 49 countries throughout the year. VTEL interviews from the United States. For initial refugee interviews, USCIS personnel or specifically trained Department of State officers are required to do in-person identity verification and capture biometrics. In-person interviews are overall still more effective than VTEL interviews because USCIS requires significant support to set up the VTEL interviews and continues to rely on a resettlement support center staff for the success of those interviews. However, the use of VTEL is a useful enhancement and has created flexibilities for us to complete refugee processing remotely where there are COVID-related travel restrictions or urgent but small caseloads that warrant the use of this flexibility and the use of this tool. VTEL also provides an important tool to help us complete timely re-interviews when we have additional information that we need to ask of refugee applicants. While we expect to conduct the vast majority of refugee interviews in person going forward, we continue to find ways to streamline VTEL interviews and to use technology to efficiently reach certain refugee applicants that are in remote locations.
Great, thank you, Drew. That was very helpful. Okay, the next question is, understanding that approved refugee beneficiaries of Form I-730, Refugee Asylee Relative Petition, count toward the refugee admissions ceiling, and that ceiling has increased. What is USCIS doing to process these petitions more efficiently?
So, Noreen, I can take that. I think I largely answered that with the question that I answered before on I-730s. Just to sort of recap that some of the things that we're doing. We are, doing an internal review of resources allocated, hoping to have additional resources and make recommendations. We are we'll continue to target refugee circuit processing teams on circuit rides to complete more Form I-730s. Like I mentioned, the one in Uganda, and we are, working to provide more transparency in our processing, more information on our website. And which we hope we will be able to publish soon, welcome recommendations from stakeholders as well on things that we can do to improve the I-730 process. We've actually received a lot of really good recommendations from stakeholders, and we will continue to review those and look for ways that we can overall improve that and reduce the processing time for I-730 beneficiaries. So first of all, we have the domestic process that we adjudicate the petition here domestically, but then there's a whole piece of the adjudication that's overseas, and does vary depending on the location, whether it's USCIS, State Department, a refugee circuit ride team that's going there. And so we are looking at ways to really streamline it and make it more efficient.
Great, thank you, Joanna. All right, I know we run the risk of going over, but I do just want to get one more question in. And the question is, are there plans to reopen any USCIS international offices? If so, where? If not, why not? Joanna, is that something for you?
Sure, thank you. As the former chief of international operations before I moved over to now this merged International Refugee Affairs Division, it's definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I think we noted previously that USCIS is considering expanding our international footprint by opening new USCIS offices where appropriate. We're in the process of finalizing a comprehensive internal footprint analysis, which includes feedback from stakeholder interviews with the Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, Department of Defense, the CIS Ombudsman's Office, several USCIS internal stakeholders. We've received recommendations from stakeholders, public stakeholders, and we also informally consulted with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. And as part of that analysis, we looked for locations where we could support expanding USCIS's humanitarian mission, including support for the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. And now, once the analysis is complete, we will work with our State Department colleagues who need to approve the establishment of any USCIS offices abroad on next steps. And then we also must work with our Office of Chief Financial Officer to plan and allocate the necessary resources to fund the establishment of these offices. Since the creation of the Refugee Corps in 2005, USCIS staff stationed in international offices process a relatively small percentage of the refugee cases, usually 6 to 10%. due to fewer staff and other workloads. So we don't anticipate that changing, even if we expand USCIS international offices. However, USCIS staff and international offices can help provide really helpful logistical support for refugee processing teams, and also help us more quickly access smaller refugee applicant populations and urgent cases. So more to come.
Joanna, thank you so much. Unfortunately, this brings us to the end of our engagement. If you do have any additional questions, or if you have questions again outside the scope of this engagement, please do submit your questions to public.engagement@uscis.dhs.gov. I want to quickly thank our speakers. I want to also thank everyone who called in and made time for this engagement. We will be meeting again, and we will be meeting regularly on this topic. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.